Hi, I'm Nicholas. Welcome back, and this is our second video in our design thinking course. This is the first of the understanding stage, which is interviews. But before we look at interviews specifically, I want to talk a little bit more about the understanding stage. So in order to do design thinking, we really have to understand who your user is, how they behave, what they say, what they think, what they do, how they engage with objects, and how they engage with environments. To do this, we need to be able to build empathy. There are two levels of empathy building. First is an emotional empathy, where it's a little bit more subconscious level. For example, when you're watching a television show and you see a sad scene and someone is crying and you also feel sad, that is what we call emotional empathy. But when it comes to design thinking or the design process, we're actually looking at cognitive empathy. So cognitive empathy is something that is more of perspective taking, where you put yourself in another person's shoes and you really get an understanding of where they are coming from.
I've worked on storyboards for different car brands, right? So knowing there's a certain style to a certain brand is actually very important in helping me work out the angles or the shots when it comes to storyboarding some of these illustrations for these clients. So it informs me when I know a little bit more about their branding, what is their story, what is the angle that they have for their product, and that way I can think of some cool ways or some interesting ways to tell their story, right? And that would actually reinforce their brand and reinforce the value that they have to their prospective clients.
So there are three things that you typically can do to be able to build empathy. The first one is to make sure that you put yourself in a space where you can observe people. You also want to engage with the people that you're observing. And lastly, the best thing to do is really immerse yourself in the field. Because when you immerse yourself in your field, you're in the context, you're talking to the people, you actually understand why things happen the way they happen.
One of the first things that we do at the beginning is actually having people interview themselves, sort of, and I suppose it comes through that self-reflection process. So, for example, thinking about work in the context of life, thinking about how much I value passion versus pragmatism. So all these are kind of like posing these questions to the person themselves to have them really reflect and articulate and make explicit some of these things which may have been running in the background for them. The other thing is also that in the course of the interview, they also share with one another. So I have I accumulate data points not just about myself, but I can appreciate how my values and what I care about and my strengths and interests could actually be different from somebody else.
So interviews are a very good method for you to get a better understanding of who you are talking to, especially understanding what they're thinking and what they're saying. With the advantages, interviews are able to collect deep amount of insights based on the types of questions you're going to ask, and you can engage with quite a few people and get a lot of different perspectives. The disadvantage of that is, of course, the more people you speak to, the more you interview, you're going to have to process a lot more information, a lot more data, and the planning actually takes quite a bit of time as well as the post-processing of the information, because you need to transcribe some of the information down and you need to maybe convert some of the videos that you might have collected through the interview process. There are different types of interviews that you can conduct, and these vary in different types of components. The first one is actually the type of people that you are going to interview. So you can either interview the person or the people within that context, so their specific target audience, or you can interview the experts. For example, if we're interviewing the elderly in a home, you can either interview the elderly themselves or maybe the doctors and the nurses who are the experts in that field. Secondly, we are looking at the number of people. You can interview one person, you can interview a pair, or you can conduct a focus group and interview more people as well. The next thing we're looking at is proximity. When it comes to proximity, the types of interviews you can do SMS interviews, face-to-face interviews, instant messaging interviews, and telephone interviews as well. And lastly, we're looking at location. Whether you want to be in a person's home and interview them in their home maybe, or you want to do a guerrilla interview where you're on the streets and getting quick feedback from people about your topic that you've chosen. So those are the different components as well as different types of interviews that you can conduct. Next, we're looking at the different types of questions you might want to ask during an interview. So in an interview, you can have more exploratory questions or more evaluative questions. If you're looking at maybe more exploratory, something that's maybe more social, something you're not too sure about, you just want to get a broad sense of what do people really think about this particular topic. So what do people think about, for example, romance, or what do they feel about politics, or what do they feel about shopping in general? So these big, broader topics, you might go for longer questions that get them to talk a little bit more about the topics themselves. So if you're looking at just very specific questions that you want to ask, whether it's with regards to your context or your problem that you're looking at. Maybe it's about someone's experience in a workplace, or someone's experience in a particular hospital, or experience doing a government survey, so on and so forth. You can maybe look at something that's a little bit more direct, shorter interview question. So ask them just specifically what you need to know. When it comes to interviews, the structure that we typically go for is asking first about demographics, so specifics to the person's maybe age, salary, maybe questions about their daily lives, specific questions about what they do, what they think, and how they use within that particular context that you're looking at. And of course, we want to sort of be able to get that deeper thoughts. So when we get to the core of it, what are the deeper thought processes or some of the emotions that are tied within that context? And to sort of end things off, it's always good to ask a question and say, have I missed out anything as an interviewer, or as an interviewee, do you have any questions for me as an interviewer? So with this video, we've looked at the understand stage, specifically about building empathy and why it is important. Next, we also looked at interviews, how to conduct interviews, how to plan for interviews, and what to look out for when you're out there in the field conducting interviews. In the next video, we'll be looking specifically at the second part of the understand stage, which is observations.